Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here. She is a family member of Veronica Live, and we are so glad to welcome back Terry Strada. She's the national chairman for the 9/11 Families United. Terry, welcome back to Veronica Live.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back on again.
Well, I always have to have you on around 9/11, and I've got John here as my wingman today. And so where were you last week when the 9/11 memorial was happening?
I was at the memorial in Manhattan, standing about 4 people behind Donald Trump and Eric and Don Jr.
And what was it like 23 years later? Is it still as raw, or now it's just more anger?
Oh, it's a combination of both. On the day of, it's definitely raw. It's hard to be there, where it happened. I never got back any remains, so my husband's remains are interned there. So it's a really bizarre feeling. He was murdered and he's interned at the same exact location.
And was there anything moving that happened that day? I always see them saying the names. Who spoke that was memorable for the 23rd anniversary of 9/11?
I think what struck me was how many young children came to the podium to say family names of family members that they never got to meet. So there just were a lot of young children remembering their grandpa that they didn't meet, an uncle or an aunt that they never got to meet. So that was different, and that was, very sad to hear.
And I've been reading up on some of the articles that things are happening again, and I guess the families have received new data. So tell us what you've learned now.
Yeah, so in federal court this summer on July 31st, just 2 or 3 days before we went to have a hearing on the kingdom's motion to be dismissed from our lawsuit against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the judge lifted for the first time the protective order on the evidence, the kingdom's evidence. So we heard things and we saw things that have never been seen before. We saw things and heard things that were never given to the 9/11 Commission. And now you can pretty much say the 9/11 Commission got it wrong, 100%
And what was some of the new evidence that came out?
Okay, so, we knew that they were running, that the kingdom was running an anti-American pro-jihadist program out of the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. under the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. They call it Moya. And it was just filled with extremists. And there was the King Fahd Mosque out in California, same thing, just some of the nastiest extremists you can imagine. And these were the people that were contacted by Al-Qaeda. Some of them had diplomatic credentials. Some of them had ties to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda planned to come here and planned the attack, but they needed a support network in the United States for the hijackers to be met and greeted, to get their apartments, their banking, their cars, their flying lessons, all of that. And their names were exposed for the first time, and it was shocking to see how many of them came out of Moya, which makes them, they are Kingdom Saudi Arabian employees. They work for the kingdom, and you just can't deny that the kingdom, besides giving all the money that Al-Qaeda needed for the attacks, they were also giving all of the logistical support.
So I read some of the stories leading up to you coming on. It looked like the Saudis were, doing little intel runs on places they wanted to hit. Was that what came out that you were given as well? Some of the new info?
Yes, that came out also. We saw the advanced team, and their names were released. Sudan and Sudairi were the two that would go out ahead of wherever the hijackers were going. So we saw in a courtroom, like a plane, flying over from Washington, D.C. to California. Then you'd see the planes going to, I think it was Missouri and Oklahoma, and then the planes would go somewhere else. And then when they showed you in a different color the track of the two hijackers, Midar and Hazmi, it was the exact same path. So there was an advanced team that has now been told publicly. There was also an FBI informant that his name has been protected all these years. The hijackers lived with him for 2 weeks.
Is that the Bayumi I kept seeing? Omar?
No. Bayumi is a different guy, and I talk about him in a second. But this FBI agent, now we know he was a Saudi agent also. So he was a double agent.
Oh, lovely.
Bayumi. Oh yeah. It gets better. So Bayumi was here on a student visa and worked at a company that he never went to work for. He never showed up at. He was getting a stipend and he reported to the ambassador in the embassy in Washington, D.C. So he's here on a student visa. He doesn't go to work. His salary tripled when the hijackers got here. And he is the one that met them in a Mediterranean cafe out in California and then started helping them with their housing. And then we saw a casing video of the U.S. Capitol that Bayumi filmed. And it is creepy to watch. He's slowly going over the Capitol. He's slowly panning over the security entrances. He goes into the Capitol and shows the security on the inside of the Capitol. And he talks about the plan. And he says, they call our children demons. These are the demons of, he called it it's horrible to hear. It's all been translated into English, and the kingdom approved it, said, yep, that's accurate translation. And when they were asked about it in court, when the lawyers or the judge said, demons, this is the words extremists use. And the lawyers, all they could say was, yeah, that was an unfortunate statement. They had no defense. There also in this evidence that we saw for the first time, a plane. It's a drawing. There's a plane on a piece of paper, and then there's calculations. And it's when you put the mathematical and you do the math, it's a trajectory of how to land a plane and hit a target on the ground if you don't have any instruments. Because these hijackers, they took flying lessons to take off. They didn't take flying lessons how to land a plane. But they did have the mathematical calculations how to bring it down into the Pentagon and into the Capitol. But we know that the Capitol one was never hit because of Flight 93 heroes. And then there's a welcoming party. And the 9/11 Commission said, it was nothing, that those guys were just in the back room, and meaning Hazmi and Madar, and they had nothing to do with it. And no, you watch the full video, they are the guests of honor. And it is filled with extremists, and it's filled with Saudi nationals out of Moya. There's also a film of Bayumi with Awaki. Awaki was the one that was the underwear bomber in California that was caught before he was able to blow up an airplane.
Oh, right.
In California. Remember him? Yeah, he's a bad guy. He's another Al-Qaeda guy. There's movies of him with him. So it was just incredible to see. I mean, I cried because I've talked about this support network for over 10 years, and then to see their faces and to see their titles, and then to see which jobs they were tasked with to help the hijackers. But it's just there's just no denying. Bayumi was looking for their apartment he was in, talking to his, the woman that runs the community that he was renting from, and he was in there trying to secure an apartment before the hijackers came into the United States. So it wasn't after he met them. He just helped, a couple of Saudis that he met in a restaurant.
Good.
So,
Terry,
it's extraordinary. Yeah.
One of the things that, to me, it's still a powerful experience. I was watching on the ceremony on the TV, and it's still, I still remember, where I was at and all that. I guess it's kind of like, the people in World War II in Pearl Harbor, where were you at? And it's like, well, I know where I was at 9/11.
I'll never forget. Yeah.
And I remember every bit of that, But But as you pointed out, they bring up grandchildren that never met their grandfather, and time has a way of making things fuzzy and things going away and stuff. And we're 20 plus years on now. Is that a detriment to what's going on? I mean, the Saudis, the American government has a lot of interest, and one of them is not embarrassing the Saudis anymore. I think they need them for what's going on in the Middle East right now, and it just seems to be that there's always the political and the Middle East problems stuff always coming up that would really stop any kind of justice from real justice from being realized?
It certainly makes it harder for us because the administration does exactly what you're saying. They protect the Saudis and they do not help and cooperate with us. I mean, there's an executive order for the Department of Justice to hand over everything, and they did not hand it all over. All of this evidence that we just got on al-Bayoumi, the plane drawing, the welcoming video, the casing video, that came from London. That came from the Metropolitan Police in London, because Bayoumi left the United States right before the attacks, and since he was a person of interest, he was arrested in London, and they raided his apartment, and that's where all of this evidence has been. But it actually, I'm sorry, it was sent here at the end of September in 2001, because they raided his apartment 10 days after September 11th. And our FBI, DOJ, chose to bury it. They didn't give it to the 9/11 Commission. They did not give it to the Guantanamo Bay prosecutors, and they did not give it to our lawyers. We had to go to London to get the evidence.
Well, do you think justice will ever be done in your lifetime? I mean, we still have, KSM is still in Gitmo,
He's still rotting down there eating his hummus.
Yeah. I know. I know, the Gitmo thing has its own set of problems. But no, we just broke through everything this summer. I mean, this is the first time the judge has lifted the protective order on this evidence. It's incredible. So no, it's moving straight through the courts here. We're waiting for his decision on whether he's going to dismiss them or not. But regardless, the other side's going to appeal. Everything will be solidified as long as we can get this last piece of legislation passed called the Ensuring Justice for Victims of Terrorism Act. I'm going to D.C. tomorrow. I've been working on it for about 18 months. And that will solidify the aiding and abetting that can be applied to our case against the kingdom and for any other terrorist victim going forward, that you can hold the sponsors of the attacks accountable. But yeah, it's going to happen in my lifetime because we have made huge, huge advances.
So one of the things, did I read this right, that the FBI actually edited like one of the videos that was shared with you all, that it wasn't accurate? That, I mean, what are your thoughts on this 9/11 commission? Sounds like, it doesn't sound like they were on your team, the family's team. Am I reading that wrong?
No, you're correct. It was designed to lead you away from the Saudis. It was designed that way. It wasn't supposed to be that way. That's not what they told people when they were doing it. They had a lot of the facts right, but their analysis and their conclusions are wrong. But they're wrong mostly because they didn't have this evidence. And that's not the commissioner's fault. If the FBI didn't give it to them, and they're saying they didn't have it. I mean, we've talked to the commissioners. We've had experts review this that worked in the CIA, and they've all said we never saw this before. But they did give it to the FBI 23 years ago. The FBI just sat on it. They didn't want. It was never supposed to be seen. We were never supposed to have this evidence.
Well, are you angry? Because John and I want the FBI cleaned up just from the last few years of what we're dealing with. So it sounds like it's been corrupt for 23 years. I mean, like, that ticks me off even more. These were Americans that were killed.
I know. It absolutely does. There's a small group of very arrogant people in the Department of Justice and in the FBI and the CIA. It's self-preservation. That is why they hid all of this stuff. 9/11 was an intelligence failure. It was a monumental intelligence failure. And they don't want to be embarrassed themselves. So
that word legacy, their legacy is more important than families knowing what happened.
Yes. And the American people. And going and holding the sponsors of the attack responsible. This is all about shutting down the pipeline of money. This is exposing the underbelly of terrorism and how it's financed, because I'm just talking about Bayoumi evidence. There's bank records, there's phone records, there is so much that's coming out in the courtroom, all because of the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act that we had to take 7 years to enact because they didn't want us to be able to hold the kingdom accountable because they don't want this evidence to see the light of day.
So you just sent letters to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump seeking accountability and support for terrorism victims. What were these letters about, Terry?
Yes, so it was to asking them to prioritize Saudi accountability, whichever one becomes president, as soon as they step into office, that you have to take Saudi, based on all of this evidence that came out this summer, you can no longer deny that the kingdom was involved. Trump can't say on a golf course, it's too bad nobody got to the bottom of this, because we've definitely gotten to the bottom of it. And Kamala Harris can't ignore us any longer. I mean, we've written to Biden numerous times. He wrote the executive order. He released a lot of information, but then he wouldn't confront Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. And that's the job. That is their job, is to do the right thing by the families, look at this evidence and tell MBS, the gig's up. I mean, it's not MBS. We are not really suing like the current Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We're suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that existed 20-some years ago that was spreading, Wahhabism, extremism all around the world. I mean, that's what they were doing in the 90s. Every single mosque they were building, they were filling with extremists. And the United States was not immune to that. And when Osama bin Laden put out the fatwa, he was going to attack and kill Americans on U.S. soil, he meant it. And they didn't stop it.
And how do you see Gitmo now? Because that seemed to, people were talking about that as well. KSM's just hanging out there. I mean, what should happen with these prisoners? Just leave them there forever? I mean, I'm fine with that.
Right. I am too. I mean, yeah, they came out with a plea deal that the families were not, we didn't get the heads up that it was coming or that it was going to happen. So it kind of hit us hard. And we didn't get the details of the plea deal. And the plea deal came out on the exact same day that we were coming out of court with all of this new evidence against the kingdom. I had the press all lined up to talk about the Saudis, and the news of Gitmo broke, and that's all they wanted to talk about. So we lost our momentum with the media, and I came home and I turned on the TV, and that Russian prisoner swap was also happening on the same day. And family members were starting to talk and ask, well, what is the details of this plea deal? Where are they going to, serve their life sentence? And can you guarantee us that they will never be used in a prisoner swap? Another administration could come in 4 years and say, I'm going to let them go.
Right.
We don't know the details, but that was a terrifying thought. And I'm reading a book right now, James Foley, the journalist that was, beheaded by ISIS. And there's a sentence in there that says at one time they were considering the Guantanamo Bay prisoners as a swap to get some Americans out. So it's, we weren't thinking of the unthinkable. And also with the plea deal, I didn't understand what they thought we were getting out of this plea deal, because it was KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and the other four that want to take the death penalty off the table. And that's what they were getting. What were we getting in return? They said, well, they were going to admit they were guilty. Well, they already admitted they were guilty. I've seen their admission of guilt. Then they have no remorse, and they said if they had the opportunity to do it, they would do it again.
I say they're proud of it.
They are very proud of it. And so, and they have a following, That one of the things they told us is that we could write letters to KSM. And I was like, oh, you blankety, blankety, blank, blank, blank.
I can help you write that letter, Terry.
2 words.
Yeah, I want to be a pen.
2 words.
Yeah. Like, I want to be pen pals with him. And, he would want that, right? He would welcome mail coming to him and getting to write back. It would all be censored. you're not going to get anything that wouldn't be censored by the government anyway. But he would, like, that's another thing that he would enjoy. He would like to get letters and start writing to people. It gives him something to do. It's like, no, he should be locked up in a hole. So the plea deal,
I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a letter, I mean, that just...
Exactly. So the plea deal, 3 days later, Austin came and reversed it. And, that's what they're arguing down there now, is to reverse the reversal.
Oh my gosh.
So,
okay.
I don't know
so I have to ask you.
I think they realized they stepped in it. When that was a political landmine somebody stepped on.
Yes, that was.
They were backtracking as quick as they could.
Yes, I think. Well, the families were outraged, and it's an election year, and I don't think they wanted that on their plate.
No. So what about the PGA? Because we've talked about the live golf and all of that. Now they're trying to kumbaya as a family, which I'm sure you're still outraged at it from the beginning of all of this mess.
Yes, and Tiger Woods was in New York City. They were meeting with Liv on either the 10th or the 11th. I mean, right at the anniversary. They're in New York City meeting with Liv Golf. So I know that the other organization put out a pretty strong letter of, how tone deaf are you people? But that's the Saudis. They're just always sticking it to us.
Yeah. So what have we missed, Terry? Because, you're the national chair for all the families. And I saw a story I wanted to ask you about. It was like 40% of the families, you said your husband's never been ID'd today that don't have their love member, I guess, their body back, anything. So I didn't realize that was such a high number, because I feel like we're so advanced now in DNA, and I had no idea until I read this story. We had, this journalist on last week, Jake Novak, and he talked about it because he saw the planes go into the tower. So is that shocking? 23 years later, with the how we've advanced things.
Yeah, it's upsetting. It's disappointing. I mean, look, they've done amazing work. They had as much money as they possibly needed to develop, really advanced DNA testing. It'd be so much better than what we had before 9/11, but it's just not good enough. I mean, the body parts that are interned at the memorial, and I know my husband's one of them because I didn't get anything back, so I know that's where he is. They're just extremely damaged. It wasn't just fire, it was the chemicals. So I don't know. They keep advancing, and then every couple of years you'll hear, a couple of more identifications have been made. It'd be nice if they could advance it all the way and get all of these body parts returned or left behind. Some people have signed off and said, do not contact me. I don't want to know. Okay. Everybody's different.
So what are we missing? I mean, I'm so happy that more information has come out. I still wish Saudi would just write all these families $10 million checks and move on. And right. That would make me happy, and then I always, before you come on, I always Google, what your husband looked like. And he was so handsome. There's a picture of him online with the tuxedo and, he was so beautiful, such a handsome husband. Yeah. What do you miss most? 23 years later, and you're a grandmother now, so I know that's got to be hard too some days.
It is. Everything is bittersweet. I miss him terribly. I probably am missing him more now as I get older because the kids are all gone. And I'm an empty nester, but I'm an empty nester all by myself. And with the kids gone, life. I'm just this independent. I have to be independent, but I have to do everything. Like there is never anybody to pick up the slack, or I could do that for you over the weekend. I can help you with this. I can help you with that. It's just I just miss him. I miss him being here with me, going, like you said, to go visit the kids, see the grandchildren, and Justin is plowing along in his Army career. So, he's just missed all the time.
Well, Terry, it's always a pleasure, and you are such a fighter. Continue the fight, and when Saudi Arabia writes the $10 million family checks, I'm going to be there with you because it's so deserved. It's so deserved, and I'm so proud of you. I still have my United We Stand license plate on my car, and I was so worried. I thought they had done away with it because somebody said, "Oh, they're not making it anymore." And in Florida, when you've had a plate on for 10 years, you have to get a new one. And I was literally mortified. I'm like, I'm not giving up my plate, but I got it. And some of us never forget. So I hope you know that.
Thank you. I do know that. You're wonderful. I know that. And thank you for all of your love and support that you show. And thank you for letting me come on the show or on your show. And if anybody wants to go to the website, 911familiesunited.org. There are template letters that go into Congress asking for support of the EJVTA. We've had 4,000 letters go in the last 3 weeks.
Awesome.
And so the EJVTA is what's needed next. Like I said, I'm going back to D.C. tomorrow because that will solidify the way aiding and abetting is applied, and we need it. So
how is that looking, Terry? As far as is it bipartisan support or kind of?
Oh yeah, huge bipartisan support. It's just been dragging out for a couple of different reasons, and I think we've passed over some of the hurdles, and they're going to start moving on it. And that's how things work in D.C. They're slow, they're dragged out, and then when they happen quick.
Wow. Well, it's always a pleasure. Keep us posted. I'll keep calling you to come back on. We've been talking with Terry Strada, the national chairman for 9/11 Families United. God bless you, Terry. You're such a warrior.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks for joining Veronica Live.